So this is the Web Challenge Blinker Fluids. It's a 1-star challenge. Here is the info if you want to read that. The cliff notes for this challenge is that the program relies upon a vulnerable version of a node package that's vulnerable to remote code execution. So we're simply just going to inject payload and read the flag that way. So if we jump into the source code, now I'm probably going to say this in like every single video, but the way I like to do it is I find that I learn a lot more, and it's just a lot more effective use of my time to try and, if I'm trying to learn, to try and read the code without looking at the site first. So that's what I'm going to do. First thing I always do is just check the Docker file. If you don't know a lot of Docker, it's okay. You'll get more and more used to it as you start looking at more and more of them. But basically, I'm just trying to look and see like what is getting installed. And if there's like anything out of the ordinary here, we just kind of typical. It's creating an app directory, copying everything into it, putting the flag in the root directory so we know where the flag is. It's just root flag.txt, creating a user. It's installing, it's setting up the supervisor so it'll run it, it's exposing, that's the port it'll be on, and then this is just the like entry point command. So whenever this container fires up, it's running the supervisor. So I always go ahead and look at that, and we see it's just a node application. It's starting the index.js file. And then this would just be the script you would run if you want to build it locally. So then nothing's sticking out so far. So I always go and look at the package JSON file. And the first thing that like caught my eye is we're using specific versions of packages. And whenever I see that, it always makes me wonder, like, why are we using a specific version? Usually they'll have it like, it'll be something like, which means get this version or anything newer. But whenever it's a specific version, it makes me think like, oh, one of these must have a vulnerability in it, and that's why they're using the specific version. Although you see here, it's the specific version on everything. And maybe these are just the newest ones and that's how they did it, but definitely something to always kind of note and check. So anyway, we see we're starting with the index, so I always just move through and look. Basically, we're trying to get a feel for what the application is, like what the website is and what it's doing, and then I'll go look at it and kind of see if I'm right, and then use that to like fill in any gaps. Like I said, this is harder for me to just like look at it and try and understand, and so that hardness of it helps me learn better. If we don't see anything anything to note here, we're running a database. So if we go and look at the database, we can get an idea for the schema. We see we're just creating an invoice ID. We have it looks like the value for these is going to be some UUID. We can list the invoices. It's just going to be SQL statement for order by ID and descending. We have a way to get a specific invoice, which is going to take everything from that, but everything is just the ID and when it was created, so not a lot of info there. We have a way to add one. Doesn't look like it's vulnerable to any kind of SQL injection, and we have a way to delete an invoice. Kind of the same thing. Nothing sticks out that's vulnerable there. So then usually I'll go and look at the routes next, because that's kind of the important one that tells you how it's handling the request. So this is often like where the code flow goes through running the app. So we see just the normal web root, it's rendering the index. We have an endpoint to list everything, which is going to call that list invoices database function. We have a way to add one, and then we see here some codes being run, and then we have a way to delete one. But if we look at this one, we see right away this like jumps out is we're using one of our helper scripts we wrote, and we're making a PDF with markdown content, and this from the request body. So this is It's a post request. So what's in here is what we're going to be able to control as a user. And that's always kind of where you want to look for, is what is the user controlled input, because that's where we're most often going to find the vulnerability, is what we control and then how the program interacts with it. So if we see right away we're making a PDF, that's, usually that's pretty laden with vulnerabilities. So we see that it's calling that add invoice function, which is in the database, which is just going to add a UUID to the database and when it created and stuff. It doesn't look like anything else is happening here. So if we go to the MD helper, which will be a helper that was written for this, we see it's using MD to PDF. It's creating just, I'm assuming it's just some random UUID version 4. And then we have this function here, where it's actually looks like it's creating the PDF and it's writing it to the static invoices, which if we look in here, usually this is just where like all the JavaScript and images and everything is kept. Looks like it's writing a PDF to here, and then it just has some options. I don't really know what these do, but this already kind of like we have an idea of what the site does, right? It looks like a pretty basic site. We can create PDF files and then go and look at them. So if we actually look at burp loaded somewhere. If we actually go and look at the site. So right now the CTF just started and they're having problems getting the Dockers up. So I'm just got a local instance running and it's going to be the same. Well, I assume I haven't actually gotten the flag yet, but yeah, we'll see. So it looks like it just lists the invoice. It looks like whatever PDF it creates, you can read. And then it looks like you can create your own PDF. So my guess is that in the process of creating the PDF, there's some kind of vulnerability, which also makes me, first thing I want to do is check what this MD to PDF is, and then keeping in mind that we're using a specific version of it, which again kind of makes me wonder some things. So the first thing I do is search for MD to PDF. What was it? 4.1.0 exploit. And let's click the first link. And we see that first off, we're not using newer version. So in September of 2021 is when we're using this. So, and we have critical vulnerability. So right away, this jumps out remote code execution. And so already I feel like, this is pretty much the path we want to explore. We're using an older version that has a known vulnerability. And here we've already got kind of like a payload, like proof of concept telling us what's happening. So affected versions of this package are vulnerable to remote code execution, utilizing the library gray matter to parse front matter content without disabling the JavaScript engine. Now here's kind of actually, I really like this challenge, but only for this. Well, I mean, it's a good challenge, but like I really like it for this interesting reason, because I think a lot of people, a lot of like newer people or inexperienced are going to struggle with this, because you're kind of like in the copy paste payload mode without really trying to think about like what's going on and what's happening. So what we're going to find here is, let's actually compare it with this code that we're using. So what was it in? So if we see here, actually, let me get rid of, we see here, we're kind of doing the same thing, right? We're using the same package, MD to PDF. Here's our content. Destination, we're writing it somewhere different. And we do have these launch options, which I don't know what they mean. But the kind of most logical thing to do, right, is just go ahead and let's jump in and make this our payload and see what happens. And this is actually where you're going to run into a little bit of a problem, because if we go to, I got burp open here somewhere. Oops. So if we go, we're going to create a new PDF, right? Let's just get rid of all of this. Well, and first off, right, there's going to be a couple things wrong with this. What we're doing here I'll go ahead and just save this because we're going to want to just use burp repeater. And this should, oh, it's going to escape it for me. Duh. I'll show you what I was going to ramble about. If I can find, here we go. So here is our burp. Here is, so let's just go ahead and control R to send that to repeater. What I was going to say is it's going to mess up because we have double quotes in it, but I forgot. It's just going to automatically escape this. Now, first off, if we just go ahead and copy and paste this in, right, we're not going to be able to know if this works or not, because what it's just actually doing is it's going to, we see it's importing a child process, which is kind of like a node thing, and I don't know Node that well, so I'm not going to be able to explain it very well. But basically, it's what you need to import in order to like do stuff, and here we're going to run exec sync, so we're basically just executing the ID command and outputting that to the temp folder RCE. Now, we won't, if we're not testing this locally, like if we were just doing this on the server for the challenge, like we would never know if this worked or not, right? Because we can't access the temp folder. But on the Docker instance, I'm not connected to Docker. So if we, this is just how you want to connect to the container that's running. I believe it's called web blinker fluids, and we're going to run the shell. All right, so it's not blinker fluid. Oh, it'd help if I spelled it right. There we go. So now we are actually in the running container. So we're on the server basically. So we can look in the temp folder and see, well, nothing got created. It didn't work. So why won't it work? So this is the kind of issue where I think if you're just copy pasting stuff, you're not gonna know why it's not working, or it's where you're gonna get in trouble, right? Like maybe you're not familiar with Node, you don't know what any of this is doing. But if we look, just looking at the command, right, it kind of looks weird. Like what is JSN and why is there an N on the end? And if you look at the kind of other ones, like kind of how it's actually, you'd want to create a PDF, right? You've got ends for these line breaks. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, is this actually, kind of the right command? Like maybe they meant /n here. So maybe you're running this JSN function. What does that do? I don't know. So one of the things I would always suggest doing is, right, this is just, this site here, it's just kind of like an aggregated site. They just, I don't even know if they do it manually or they're just scraping stuff. But you always kind of want to go to the source, right? Like, let's go actually figure out, like, we don't have to dive into the actual code. I mean, sometimes you'll, on the harder challenges, you'll end up needing to do that. But for here, let's just actually see where, you know, what the actual report is, what the vulnerability was. We know that it's the gray matter, so it's not the actual MDF or MD to PDF package that has vulnerability, it's a package it's depending on. So if we go and look at the MDF, we can see, I mean, it depends on a bunch of packages, and one of them is the gray matter package. But the thing I want to do, you can get to it either way, like going to gray matter or here, but let's actually go to the GitHub. Usually, right, there was a vulnerability, it got fixed. Obviously it got fixed, otherwise we wouldn't be forced to use the older version. So let's actually look at the issue that probably led to it getting changed. So if we go to the issues and kind of scroll through, we knew, right, it's after September 1st, 2021, but you just kind of like look through them. There was another one up there, and that's going to turn out to not be it. But look, if we see gray matter exposes front matter. So this is actually the person who found it. Or maybe it's not, but anyway, if we actually read this, we can see that it's more like the original, right? This is more getting to the source. And if we look at the actual payload, we see it's different, right? We have /n, which is different than what you're going to find if you just jumped to the I don't remember where that site was, but if you just jumped to that Synac, the first top link in Google, and I don't even think these show up. I have like my browser annoyingly positioned exactly where the video bar is. So, so if we, what do we actually do? MD to PDF, 4.1.0 exploit. Like if you see the other ones, they're all just these aggregated lists. And then this is just other stuff that Google thinks might be what we're looking for, and it actually isn't. So unless you actually try and go to the source, or you know enough kind of like JavaScript and Node to kind of realize that like this isn't anything that doesn't make sense, you're going to end up being stuck and frustrated. So it always helps to go to the source, try and read where the actual, go into the GitHub, read where the actual vulnerability was reported. Usually there's, text chain of people commenting and replying, and you can get a lot of information from that if you're struggling to get something to work. So if we change that, right? So let's put it the way that it's actually supposed to be with these line breaks, and go ahead and do that. Then if we look at our, right, now we see it created that RCE, so we know it's actually working now. So what we could do on this, if we don't have access to the local file, and this is what I'm actually going to do once everything kind of gets fixed and I can actually try and get the flag, but we know we want to read the flag, so we're just going to do cat. We know it's in the root folder because in the Docker file that's told us where it's putting the flag, and we're just going to write that flag to a location that we're able to read. Well, we know, I need to escape that. We know that we can read the invoices folder, right? Because we're able to, oops, where is it? Like we're able to go here, so we can go to static invoices. We have read access to that folder. Oops, what am I doing? So let's put it in app static invoices, and then we'll just call it flag.txt. So now we're going to write the root flag, or the flag that's in the root directory. We're going to write it to a directory that we can read from externally. It says it worked. So then if we go to, right, we instead want, we see we get the flag. So that exact same payload should work on the server or for the CTF whenever the challenge actually starts running. So anyway, that's kind of this challenge. If this helped you or got any good information out of it, like, that's awesome. I'm glad you made it through the video and listened to me ramble. If you wanted to like or subscribe or anything, that like just really makes me feel good and makes me want to make more videos. So, anyway, yeah, thanks. That's it.